Do you have what it takes to kill the person sent to kill you? Susan Kuhnhausen killed the hitman her husband sent to kill her. Susan, who now goes by Susan Walters, was 51 at the time, a nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center in Oregon. She returned home after a day shift on September 6, 2006, to find a note from her husband Mike. Sue, haven't been sleeping, had to get away, went to the beach. Alone, she noticed her bedroom was abnormally dark and wondered if she'd forgotten to open the curtains early that morning. When she went into the room, a 190-pound man carrying a hammer and wearing yellow gloves attacked her. The hitman and her husband had both underestimated 5'4" Susan, who was overweight and had bad knees, and it cost them both their lives. As an emergency room nurse of 30 years, she had dealt with all manner of patients. She had administered care to disagreeable and thrashing men, and she was no stranger to cracking open a chest in an emergency. Part of her training involved learning self-defense, such as how to slip out of a headlock. This training, though limited, and her experiences in the ER gave her some footing from which to meet her attacker. While many would understandably run away, Susan crowded the hitman, knowing that the swings of the hammer would have less force if she was closer to him. The hammer hit her temple, but the blow was of less force than if she were further from him. "Who are you and what do you want?" she asked, slamming her body against him in an attempt to knock him over. He didn't fall over, but surprised by her fortitude, he told her she was strong. In that moment, Susan felt a surge of adrenaline. She didn't know why, but she knew he was there to kill her. She pushed him again, demanding who had sent him. She grappled for the hammer and hit the claw side into his skull 3 or 4 times. He grabbed the hammer out of her hand, so she grabbed him by the throat, shouting in his face, "Who sent you here?" and squeezed his throat, cutting off his air supply. Susan, who had spent her life saving lives, panicked when the hitman turned blue. "I don't know what I thought," she said. "I just had to get out of there." As she ran out of the room, he caught her and knocked her to the floor with several punches to her face. It would seem her courage was not enough. The hitman stood over her with the hammer, but Susan wasn't giving up. She had a goal: get the hammer, or her life would be over. She doesn't remember how, but she got him to the floor, then bit him several times, thinking that if she died there would be DNA evidence tying them together. The fight went on for around 14 minutes. In that time, she rifled through his pockets looking for his ID, so she could toss it behind her dresser for the police to find later. She said of this moment she was like a downed power line snapping on the pavement. As the fight went on, she managed to climb on top of him by throwing her leg over his body. Then she hooked her arm around his neck, asking him a final time, "Tell me who sent you here and I'll call you a f***ing ambulance." He only growled, and for her own survival she tightened her forearm against his throat until he stopped moving. She picked up the hammer and went to her neighbor's house, who called 911. Susan was estranged from her husband Mike of 18 years. In the early years of their relationship, he projected an image of positivity. She liked him for his love of the outdoors and for being interested in the deeper things. But all of that would pass, and in its place Susan lived with a deeply unhappy man, who gambled and harangued her if she went anywhere or spent any money. Although she had thrown him out, they were still speaking, and she hadn't changed the locks or her security alarm code, which was the date of their anniversary. Perhaps she was hoping he would eventually change. She had asked him to house sit her cats the day he left her a note and sent the hitman to kill her. Mike knew the hitman, Edward Dalton Haffey, as he had hired him to work as a janitor at Fantasy Adult Video, where he himself was a janitorial supervisor. Haffey had previously served 9 years for paying a hitman to kill his ex-girlfriend in 1991, and when he attempted to repeat history, it would ironically be what killed him. A former cellmate testified that Haffey had contacted him about a burglary job. They met with Mike, who offered him $5,000 to kill Susan. The cellmate declined, and Haffey took the job alone. The police found no sign of a break-in. The security alarm had been disabled, and Haffey had left behind a backpack with a daily planner containing Mike's new cell phone number and a note to call him. According to prosecutor Brian Davidson, the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Haffey had been promised $50,000 for the murder. Following his death, his aunt sent Susan a letter saying she did the right thing and spared others from the same fate. In the event of Susan's death, Mike, who was then broke and had recently lost his job, would gain their house valued at $300,000. He died of prostate cancer in 2014, 3 months before he was scheduled to be released. Susan said she doesn't mourn his death, but the relationship they didn't have. Being an imperfect woman, I married an imperfect man, thinking that we could love, honor, and negotiate and have a good life together, she said. But he had issues around abandonment and anger and anxiety that he couldn't overcome. Susan was understandably changed from the incident. She moved to a new house where she laid a gravel driveway so she could hear anyone approaching, and avoids having her back to doorways. She struggled with being called a hero for killing a man, having spent her life's work saving lives. But in her own words, she is grateful that she was brave enough to take a chance on her own life.
Still here. Go ahead and subscribe. There's plenty more chills and creepy stories that are going to waste without your eyes and ears. But don't just watch. If you have something to say, put it in the comments. There was something else I was going to say. Something about liking the video. Never mind. I'm Deadhead. Only I and nothing more.